Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, this is Bigmeks Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge and this is the paint palette tutorial. It's not a full length tutorial. What we've done is we broke down the video into 6 different sections so we can do 6 different versions of something. Example, leather, metallics, and you can get a good look at 6 different ways of doing things so you can find the colour for your army a lot faster than going through loads and loads of tutorials. So in a minute there's going to be 6 different images with timestamps so you can find the bit of the video that you want, and as this is not a normal layout of tutorial, I may not see you at the end, although I will be summarising everything at the end. So if I don't see you at the end, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, share with your friends and leave a comment if you want to request any more paint palette videos. So here are your timestamps so you can find the colour scheme that you want. This is 6 different ways to paint plague bearers or dead flesh, rotten flesh, death guard, anything like that. In this particular video I have tried to speed up the footage a little bit more than usual, so when we crack on in a second, yeah, things are going to be quite fast to try and shorten this type of video down a little bit so you can get to the end result quicker and, you know, pick the colour scheme you want. So, Plague Bearer number 1, we have started with a Vallejo's Black Primer, and we are going to add Games Workshop's Bugman's Glow over the top of that. That's going to take a couple of layers, obviously. Next up, we're going to add Games Workshop's OGRYN CAMO into the Bugman's Glow, and start highlighting those raised sections. I was going to just use this on the stomach, but I decided to go all over the model with it. Next, it's Bugman's Glow and Model Air German Grey. What we're going to do here is we're going to start using that to glaze the opposite way from the way we've originally been going with the highlights. We're going to sort of glaze the shading in over the yellowy tones and over the pink tones to pull it together and make it look all bruised and more rotten. I do kind of like the way this one's going. Next, we're going to use Deep Red by Scale 75, just because it's a good solid red to start doing all the wounds with. After that, we're going to add Tandalos Red into the Deep Red, and the Tandalos Red is at Scale 75 as well. I'm going to start working around the edges of all those wounds because Tandalos Red makes this red a bit darker. Next, for the claws and teeth, we're going to use Model Air German Grey as a base, because it's a good solid base. It's going to give us some okay coverage for this as well. After that, we're going to use Games Workshop's WAZDAKKA and RAKARTH Flesh mixed together, which is a combination I like because it changes the tone of the red quite well. And if you put enough RAKARTH Flesh into something, you can just highlight it with itself. Now we're going to use that mix again, but we're going to add even more RAKARTH Flesh because that's just a really good way of highlighting things. Just mixing the paints in, and RAKARTH Flesh sort of takes the colour out, sort of mutes it, so it makes a really good highlight. Next, we're going to use Scale 75's Iroko, which is a yellowish tone. We're going to use that to start picking out all the warts. After that, we're using Games Workshop's Dawnstone to start picking out those teeth again. It's basically an overbrush for these teeth and claws. The grey is just going to give us a nice contrast to everything else, but we have a grey hue underneath. Next, we're going to use Model Air Sand Yellow just on its own. And that is going to be a highlight for all the skin. Next, we're going to go back to our combination of Bugman's Glow and German Grey by Model Air, adding a lot more grey into it this time. It will still blend and contrast quite well, and you can see it's really starting to bring in those shades and give a nice bruised effect to contrast the yellows and the reds. Next, we're going to use Games Workshop's Flayed One Flesh, and we're going to add that to all the warts. Just the tops of the warts, doing small circles will be fine. And at some point here my camera started mucking about with the lighting, so I don't know what happened there. Next we're going to use Lamenter's Yellow, and that's really going to brighten up the work that we've done on those warts, but you should still be able to see that flayed one highlight through it. Then we're going to use Flayed One Flesh again in a smaller area over the warts, bringing it up, making it look more three-dimensional. And after that, all I'm going to do is a CARRBURG Crimson plus DRUCHII Violet mix. They're both Games Workshop washes, and I'm going to put that in the middle of groups of warts and obviously wash over them, but don't let it pull for, like, too much, as the underneath colours it'll show up on those a lot because of the high contrast, so you want to keep it watered down so there's no start and finish to the colour. So that's number one, which is actually quite fleshy, and as you can see here I was having problems with the camera trying to get it to pick up the colours. I don't know what was going on there. What I'll do is I'll show you an example of what the camera thinks it looks like and what it actually looks like by mucking about trying to get it to show up properly, although you can see it at the end rotation. So I think I like this one. It's a nice fleshy one, it's pretty cool. So let's get on with number two. Number two, which is a much more classic Nurgle colour, as any Plague Bearer would be quite happy in this colour. And it works for your Death Guard army and most other things as well, like I was saying in the beginning. So we're using Deathworld Forest by Games Workshop over a Vallejo Black Primer. Then, once we've got a nice solid coat of that, we're going to use Scale 75's Eldandale Violet, water it down and use it as quite a thick wash. And this gives a very interesting result and makes this model extremely easy. Next we're going to go back to the Games Workshop Deathworld Forest. Just start bringing out the more pronounced areas. Obviously you don't want to cover that whole tone we've got now because it's quite an interesting tone and we're going to use that later, but we're going to start bringing up most of the highlight areas, leaving some of that previous colour underneath, as you can see. Next we're going to use Death Guard Green and add that into the Deathworld Forest as a mix and start highlighting those areas a little bit more. I really liked where this was going straight from the start. I did like that really high purple contrast in the shades. After that we're just going to use Death Guard Green on its own. And after that we're going to add Death Guard Green and CADIAN FLESHTONE. That's going to start changing the hue, the saturation of the skin, so now it looks a lot more pale. Then we're going to use Games Workshop's Screamer Pink, and we're going to use this for the intestines and most of the open wounds. This is just going to be our base layer. Then we're going to add Games Workshop's Tusker Fur into the Screamer Pink. Just start using that to highlight the intestines and all the other innards and gross bits. Then we're going to add CADIAN FLESHTONE into the Tusker Fur, again using that as a highlight. I do like making these paint palettes. As you can see, I'm just throwing different colours together, just whatever I fancy doing, just to get different results. Then we're going to use model colour German Yellow for the warts on this one. Actually, I think that's supposed to say German Grey. Yeah, that's clearly German Grey. For the teeth, we're going to use Steel Legion Drab by Games Workshop. We're also going to use that on the claws. Next, we're going to use Agrax Earthshade and DRUCHII Violet mixed together and start highlighting these warts. We're going to use ZANDRI Dust to highlight the claws and the teeth. Don't have to go into too much detail on these, it's completely up to you. I'm trying to keep these ones nice and simple. Then we're going to use an Agrax Earthshade wash on the teeth and claws. Obviously I'm not going to let that pull there, I'm just showing you the contrast. I'm going to pull the rest of it out with the paintbrush. And then we're going back to model colour. It says German yellow, but I'm pretty sure they're grey. That's what I can see, so I'm pretty sure it's back to a German grey. And that is that. That was pretty quick, pretty simple. I do try and keep these each bit of the paint palette down to about 5 minutes a piece. But I did like the result of this, considering the not much effort that really went into it. And you could probably achieve most of this just by doing dry brushing with all the green colours as well. I could have used some more detailing on the intestines, and it would look good with some gloss varnish and some gore inside there, maybe some red paint. Right, number 3, the greyish dead flesh, or undead flesh, but I thought I'd throw it on here to see what we can do with Nurgle. So again, we started with Vallejo Black Primer, and we're going to add Administerium Grey by Games Workshop. That's going to take quite a few layers to build that up, or you could probably just use a similar grey spray paint if you've got one. Next we're going to use Games Workshop's Skaven Blight Dinge. And as you can see, I'm putting all that into the recesses, although I do sort of switch that up in a minute and blend it in a little bit more into the higher sections. Once we're done with that, we're going to pull all that together using DRAKENHOF Nightshade and Agrax Earthshade as a wash. This is going to give it more of a blue hue, but still keep it relatively dark. Next, we're going to use Skaven Blight Dinge. Again, then we're going to use Stormvermin Fur and Skaven Blight Dinge, and we're going to start highlighting the bits we want to stand out a little bit more now, as we've added our shading in anyway. Next up, it's Stormvermin Fur plus RAKARTH Flesh to lighten that up a little bit. Then we're going to use Mournfang Brown for the intestines. The reason we're doing that is because we're going to go for a yellow, and brown covers over the black much better, enabling you to go from black to white or black to yellow much quicker without filling all the details with paint. Next we're going to use Games Workshop's Zamzi Desert. Like I said, we had to go from black to yellow quite quickly using that brown as a base, so it's a handy tip you can use on any model or any paint scheme. Next we're going to use Requiem Flesh Shade, and we're going to add that to all the yellow sections. Then we're going to use Games Workshop's Screamer Pink, and that's going to be used to the warts. Next we're going to use Games Workshop's Talon Sand, which is a darkish brown compared to his intestines. We're going to use that to just touch the tops of the warts ever so slightly and start bringing up their colour. Next I'm going to use Rhinox Hide on all the claws and on the teeth, just to give it a base layer. I don't need to do anything spectacular with them really. And then we're going to use Model Colour Beige Yellow to start highlighting those intestines in the little raised areas. They are quite bumpy, so don't try and cover the whole lot of them. Do take your time picking out each little raised, like, knobbly bit on there. Next we're going to use RAKARTH Flesh, and I think that gets used almost as an edge highlight at this point. It's bringing up, you know, all those skin parts and the stomach and, you know, all the face details as well. We're going to use Steel Legion Drab as a highlight for the teeth and claws. Then we're going to use Pallid Witch Flesh as a last highlight for those, I believe. And that is that. Sort of a bluey toned, undead sort of theme going on with this one. Wasn't really happy with the end result on this one. I could have done more, and I messed up the detail on the face, so he doesn't take a very good photo anymore. Oh well. On to the next one, I guess. So this is the Illuminous one that Andy was talking about during the Banner and Brushes video, which started off with a prime of Iraqi Sand by Vallejo as a primer. Then we went over it with Iraqi Green to get it started, and now currently we're doing Scale 75 Goblin Green. Next, going straight into it, we're adding Scale 75 Sol Yellow into that Goblin Green. Went for this bright coloured one because some people like that bright coloured, happy Nurgle theme. I've seen it about, so I thought I'd have a crack at coming up with a paint scheme for it myself. And then we're going to use Baltar Green, nice and thin, as a wash. Then we're going to go back to our Goblin Green and Sol Yellow, and as we're going through here, we're slowly going to start adding more of that Sol Yellow by Scale 75, because then we're washing back down again, and it's just going to add a nice contrast for the recesses. Then this particular bit of footage, we've just added more Sol Yellow into that mix. Next, we're going to use Screamer Pink, which is a colour I'm using quite a lot to start the base tone for all the guts and detail work. After that, I'm going to go to Games Workshop's Emperor's Children, start highlighting the outside of that, because this particular plague bearer's got maggots in his stomach. Video could have been better if I had 6 of the exact same model, but that's really difficult to do. Next, we're going to use Scale 75's Despair Green. And this, we're going to start picking the warts out with it. So I decided, because the model's so bright, to go with a darker colour for the warts. Next, Games Workshop's Druschi Violet is used to wash the Emperor's Children and the Screamer Pink together. After that, I'm going to use Baltang Green and Drakenhof Nightshade, just to start putting in an extra bit of shading, as it still looks a little bit flat at this point. After that, we're going to add much more Sol Yellow into the Goblin Green, just to really exaggerate that contrast now, since we also washed some of it out in the last section. Next, we're going to use Model Colours Sunny Skin Tone, which is quite a pale, it's quite a pale flesh colour, but I thought on top of the warts it would work. Next, we're going to use Model Colour Sky Grey. Lots of warts on these models. I mean, lots of really good detailing, but it can be a massive pain to paint, and you always end up missing some. I think that's Sky Grey for the teeth, I believe. And then we're going to use Emperor's Children again to start picking out the highlights, once again on the insides of the wounds. Then we're going to use Sol Yellow on its own as an edge highlight for around that stomach area, knuckles, fingertips and things like that. Then we're going to use Pallet Witch Flesh mixed with Emperor's Children, and that's going to take some of the colour out of the Emperor's Children, make it more pale, and then I'm going to start using that to edge highlight things as well. For the maggots, I'm just going to use Model Colours Violet. Nice and simple. You could probably use Zarius Purple by Games Workshop if you've got that. Going to pick out the body sections, so any of the raised areas there without the grooves in, Slanesh Grey. Then I'm going to add Model Colour Sky Grey into the Slanesh Grey, just to highlight those ever so slightly. After that, I think it's just a wash of DruschiI Violet by Games Workshop. Just tone all that together. And then DruschiI Violet by Games Workshop and a little bit of Null Oil, just to darken those real deep recesses in there. And now we have something that's extremely luminous. It was a very difficult one to get this to stay in focus, or to actually show it off on camera. As I mentioned in another bit of the video, I did knock my camera and I've had to reset, and I've not quite got it the way I want it. But Yeah, illuminous green. Very illuminous green. Plague Bearers. And number 5 is one that I really enjoyed doing, just because I was mucking about with this scheme. I'm probably going to muck about with it some more. So we've started with that same Vallejo Israeli Sand primer. Then we're going to use Scale 75 Tandalos Red straight over the top of that. Then we're going to take Scale 75's Tandalos Red and add some black leather into it. Originally I started trying to use this as a way of highlighting, shading even, but I'll talk about the end result later on. After that, I'm going to use black leather on its own now, and that is actually going to be used as a highlight. See, I wasn't quite sure where this was going at the time, but it does slowly change into something much different. Now I'm going to use black leather again and add some WARPFIEND Grey by Games Workshop, sorry. And as you can see, that colour transition could have been better from the reds to the blacks, but I do like the way this one's going. Next we're going to add Slaanesh Grey into the black leather, which is a complete different jump, but as you can see it does affect the highlights there. Next I'm going to use Army Painter Red ink, but if you don't have this you could just use CARRBURG Crimson and Null Oil by Games Workshop and mix those together. I really do like this paint scheme. I'm probably going to faff around with it some more and get the blends and stuff on it perfect. Next we're going to go back to that mix of Slaanesh Grey and black leather. And it really starts to highlight things, and there's a lot of contrast on this model. It's one of the reasons I really like it. Next we're going to use Games Workshop's Baneblade Brown. It's quite a yellowy brown, so I thought we'd get away with that on the warts, and obviously that sort of tone is going to contrast with all the reds and purples that we've got. Next up, Bugman's Glow as a base for the guts and open wounds, as I didn't want to use a Screamer Pink this time, as there's already enough of that sort of tone on the model. Next, the claws are being done in Steel Legion Drab. Also do the teeth in these, I believe, but I can't quite remember. It's hard to remember when you've done 6 of them. Next, to highlight the intestines, we're going to use CADIAN FLESHTONE. Also highlighting all the other wounds with this as well. After CADIAN FLESHTONE, we're going to use RAKARTH Flesh Shade. That's going to, fill in the edges of the model where we've washed that, which is really important when the stomach's so pronounced. It adds that extra layer of detail and really makes that pop. Next we're going to use model colour German Yellow, and I think this time it is actually German Yellow, unlike on the other video where I wrote German Yellow and it was clearly German Grey. Now we're going to use CARRBURG Crimson and Null Oil just to put some more red tone into those wounds and darken them down, as they still looked a little bit flat. Next we're going to use Games Workshop's ZANDRI Dust, and we're going to use that to highlight all the claws. And then I'm going to go back to a CADIAN FLESHTONE on the guts, but in a very small amount, just picking out the very bumpy bits of the intestines. If I could be bothered to spend the time, I'd put lines down them and things like that and add extra detailing, but I didn't see the point for a paint palette video. Now we're going to use CARRBURG Crimson all over those warts, and that's going to stop the hard line at the top where I've done the little circles. We're going to blend those into the rest of the model so the warts don't look like the separate part of the model. Scale 75 Miskatonic Grey is going to be used as pretty much an edge highlighter at this point, or for the most extreme highlighted areas. Next we're going to use a Agrax Earthshade wash on all the teeth and the claws. And that is that one done. I really do like the way this has come out. It's very different. I wouldn't use it for a Death Guard army, but I've got some ideas that I want to use it for. So I'll probably do some other adaptations of this in some upcoming tutorials. So number 6 is a weird one. I went for a brownish yellowy tone, and this one I found quite interesting as well. Sort of a brownish yellow tone, but when you add red and contrast to it, it really adds to the detail and emphasizes the gore. So again, we start with that same white brown primer that I keep forgetting the name of during this video, and we're going to go straight over this entire model with Games Workshop's Steel Legion Drab. Next, we're just going to give it a flat out Reclame Flesh Shade wash by Games Workshop with a little bit of water. We don't want to completely drown the model, we just want to add the shade in there and give it some contrast. Then we're going to go back to the Steel Legion Drab and emphasize the top sections of everything. And once we're done with those highlights, we're going to start adding ZANDRI dust into the Steel Legion Drab to emphasize those highlights even more. And this is going to start making everything look much more three-dimensional. Next, we're going to use Games Workshop's CARRBURG, and as you can see, it does look very plain at this point and very pale. But when we start adding more washes onto it, you'll see that you can add pretty much any type of wash you want to start changing the colour of this, and it will come out very interesting. But we're not going to put a wash on until we've done the TUSKGOR fur by Games Workshop. The reason we're doing that first is we want to wash everything with the same colour. This is actually one of the quickest ways I've painted Plague Bearers. Next, we're going to use TUSKGOR fur, and we're going to add Games Workshop's OGRYN CAMO into that to make a sort of green-pink mix. It's a bit of a difficult one to mix, but you want like a yellowy green pink. It's really weird. You just have to keep mucking about with that one. Then once all that's dry, you can now wash this with any wash you want at any point, but I decided to use Seraphim Sepia by Games Workshop. That's going to add some yellow tones into those recesses. Next, I'm going back to the CARRBURG to start picking out the previous highlights and exaggerating those even more. And obviously I'm going to go back and bring out the TUSKGOR fur and OGRYN CAMO parts on the big stomach warts. Which, you know, in itself is a good combination. The TUSKGOR fur, Seraphim Sepia, and then put those on. You could use it for warts for everything else as well. And then we're going to use Scale 75's Moonray Flesh plus CARRBURG, which is again quite a pale colour, but it's really emphasising those highlights now. Now I'm going to use CARRBURG Crimson and Null Oil to start adding the depth into all the little recesses, mainly the wound ones and around the warts area, which were done in the same colour as the ones on his stomach. Tandalos red for the claws and teeth. Oh, no, not for the teeth, just for the claws, because the Tandalos red gives an effect that the fingertips or behind the nails might be quite sore. Then I'm going to coat those over with black leather, which just makes them look pale and muted after that. And for the teeth, I'm just going to use Model Colours Green Grey. And just give that an overbrush, because that way the teeth, they stand out from everything else. And this guy's got a pretty cheeky face. The eyeball was just done in a couple of bright yellows, and he just threw a wash on it. And I'm kind of interested in where this could go if more time and effort was put in it. But he's quite interesting. Quite happy with that one. It'd be really good for your poxwalkers, just to batch paint them. And here they are on the Lazy Susan, rotating like a bizarre Nurgle Ferris wheel. A lot of work went into this video, guys. Took 2 weeks because some of the models wasn't happy with. I wasn't happy with the footage or the colours of the paint job, so I threw them in the strip and started again, which is why this one's taken me so long. So do hit like on this video, please, and share with your friends, because hitting that like button and sharing this, it really does help us out a lot. Want to help support the channel and get cheap models and hobby supplies? Click the Element Games affiliate link in the description for 15 to 25% off. Use the promo code BIG223 on checkout to earn crystals, as crystals equal cash in your Element Games account that can be spent on your next purchase, so everybody wins. And also a big thank you to all those who already support the channel, all of our patrons, the Alt Boys, Matt, Ludwig Hofbauer, D-Wack, Mark, Dave, Tom and Spiky Dude. You are our top paying patrons. Your money helps support this channel, helps us buy models so we can keep making really cool videos for you guys. And if you want to join them, all the links for all of our social media and Patreon and everything else are all in the description. So thanks very much for watching, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I shall catch you in the next one.